Dave, we're jumping straight into a topic that seems to keep coming back,
Yeah, it really does.
especially after, difficult real-world events. That link between violent video games and actual violence.
Mm.
You probably heard recently former U.S. President Trump talking about gruesome and grisly video games, linking them to mass shootings again.
And it's such a familiar pattern, isn't it?
Yeah.
That conversation seems to always land there, like it's a simple cause and effect.
Exactly. But today, we want to sort of steer away from that simple question.
Yeah, move beyond just, do violent games make violent people?
Right. We're going to dig into what players are actually doing in these games. And maybe are there other impacts, things we're not usually talking about?
That's the plan. We're looking at some specific research today.
We are. It focuses on young people playing Grand Theft Auto V. Now, GTA V, it definitely has a reputation.
Oh, absolutely. Bank robberies,
Mm-hmm.
causing chaos in a virtual city. It's known for that stuff.
For sure. But our aim here isn't just to, rehash the usual arguments.
No, we want to use this research to really understand what's driving the players within that game world.
And maybe uncover some more insightful questions about how games might actually be influencing us. Beyond just the violence.
Precisely.
Okay, so let's get into it. One of the first things from this research that, it really caught my eye, it pushes back against that simple idea that games just pump violent thoughts into people.
Yeah, you mentioned Trump's comment about games shaping young people's thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
But the researchers here, they found something more like the reverse.
The reverse, how so?
Well, it seems it's more about the young people's own ideas, their existing perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
Those are what shape how they actually play the game.
Yeah.
It's not so much the game dictating their thoughts from scratch.
Interesting. So they bring their own worldviews into the game.
Kind of, yeah. They're not blank slates being programmed by the game.
Which, okay, that leads to something really surprising they observed. When they watched these young people playing GTA V, it wasn't actually the non-stop mayhem you might expect that stood out.
Right. This is fascinating. They found that pro-social behaviors were actually more common.
Pro-social in Grand Theft Auto, like what?
Like stopping at traffic lights, just,
Okay.
Following basic road rules sometimes, things that aren't aggressive.
Rating at virtual traffic lights, seriously.
Seriously, it happened more often than the really violent stuff the game is famous for.
Wow. Okay. That suggests that even in a world designed for breaking rules,
Our ingrained social habits, they're still powerful. They still pop up.
it makes you rethink things, doesn't it? If it's not wall-to-wall chaos, then what are players trying to achieve? What's motivating them?
And that's another key finding. The motivation often wasn't just, virtual violence for its own sake.
No.
It was often driven by what the researchers called normal aspirations,
Normal aspirations, meaning,
meaning the kinds of things people strive for in, capitalist economies. Getting a nice car, a bigger house, cool clothes, even virtual tattoos.
so like consumerism,
Yeah,
but virtual.
pretty much. Those kinds of goals seem to be a really big driver for why players were engaging with the game world, getting virtual stuff.
Okay, that shifts the focus quite a bit. Less about causing harm, more about virtual acquisition.
It seems that way. Based on this research, it was a major factor.
And the research didn't just stop at player motivation, did it? It also pointed out how the game itself kind of mirrors real-world issues.
Absolutely. This is where it gets really interesting. GTA V, for all its exaggeration, it holds up a bit of a mirror to our own society. Like, the game has out-of-pocket costs for healthcare if your character gets hurt.
Just like in the U.S. system for many people.
Exactly. And there's a bail system, too. You have to pay to get your character out of jail.
Huh. And didn't it also touch on things like social division?
It did. Things like social segregation, how different neighborhoods feel.
Right, like wealthier areas versus poorer ones?
Yeah, gated communities versus areas with, chain link fences. Players could feel like outsiders depending on who their character was and where they were. It reflects that kind of financial exclusion.
So the game world isn't just a fantasy sandbox. It's reflecting these real-world divides.
It seems to embed them into the experience. And that touches on character representation, too.
How so?
Well, you can't play as a woman, for starters. But you can harm female non-player characters.
Okay.
And then there's the difference between the main characters you can play.
Oh, yeah, Michael and Franklin.
Right. Michael, he's this wealthy white guy. Starts off pretty well off.
Has resources, connections in the game world.
Exactly. Then you got Franklin. He's a black character, starts out as a street criminal, much more disadvantaged from the get-go.
So their starting points and opportunities are totally different.
Totally different. And what often happens in the storyline is Franklin ends up doing the, let's say, dirty work for Michael.
Which highlights a power dynamic.
Absolutely. One that, unfortunately mirrors some real-world social and economic inequalities.
So that split narrative, it's basically building in social division, segregation, financial exclusion.
Material disappointment, even. It's all baked into the gameplay.
Okay, so here's a crucial point then. Players might look at the really extreme violence, blowing up cars, massive shootouts, and think, okay, that's obviously not real.
Right, they recognize the fantasy element there.
But these other systems, the competitive capitalism, the inequality, the social divisions.
The research suggests they tend to accept those aspects as just realistic, as part of how that game world works and maybe how the real world works too.
They engage with that system without maybe questioning it as much.
It seems so. They accept it as the backdrop, the reality of the game, and don't express the same critical concern about it as they might about, say, the over-the-top violence.
So the realisticness of GTAV isn't just in the graphics, it's in how it reflects these maybe uncomfortable social trends and issues.
Exactly. The researchers argue it functions, in a way, as playable social commentary, whether intended or not.
Which really flips the whole debate, doesn't it?
It certainly suggests a different focus.
Instead of just asking, does this game make people violent? Maybe the more important question is, what social and cultural ideas is this game reflecting and maybe even reinforcing?
Precisely. Are there less obvious harms embedded in the way these virtual worlds represent a real one?
Yeah. If we're going to critique these games,
maybe the focus shouldn't just be on the direct violence link. Maybe it should be on identifying those cultural or social issues that get mirrored and perhaps normalized within the game itself.
Okay, so let's try and pull the main threads together from this deep dive into the GTAV research.
Sounds good.
We started by challenging the simple idea that violent games directly cause violence.
Right. Finding instead that players' own ideas shape their gameplay.
And surprisingly, players often showed pro-social behavior, like following traffic laws, more often than extreme violence.
Driven frequently by consumerist desires, wanting virtual stuff, not just mayhem.
And then the big one. The game world itself mirrors a lot of real-world social issues. Inequality, segregation, financial systems.
Yeah, things that players seem to accept as just realistic within the game's context.
So it really does make you reconsider that standard narrative.
It does. Maybe these games are less about creating violence and more about reflecting a society that already contains these complex, sometimes troubling, systems and inequalities.
Which makes you wonder where we should really be directing our concern.
Exactly.
And that leaves us with maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. If these incredibly popular games, like Grand Theft Auto V, are reflecting our existing social and economic systems, what does the way we engage with these virtual worlds, often accepting these embedded inequalities as just part of the game, tell us about how we view those same systems in the real world?
Yeah, are we normalizing them through play?
Are there subtle ways that even escapist entertainment shapes how we understand and maybe how much we question the reality around us?
That's definitely something worth thinking about long after the console's switched off.